Before having a child, I always assumed that breastfeeding was going to be so easy. I mean, millions and millions of women have done it for hundreds of years. You have a baby, they find the booby, they drink, and then when they're tired, they go to sleep. That just sounds so easy. But I found that the more friends and family had babies, the more crazy stories I heard, and that made me a little bit paranoid about the topic. I mean, you hear of women that have torn nipples, bleeding nipples, or scabs, and the baby still wants to feed. So I went down the research rabbit hole. And today I'm going to be sharing my story with you. The good, the weird, and the oh my gosh, why did nobody tell me about these moments? So that you can have a good start and a good preparation for a healthy breastfeeding journey without all those crazy stories that literally drove me nuts. So, one technique that I found that is very helpful and, instinctive to help a baby latch on properly is if you let the baby do the breast crawl. So, for those of you that don't know what the breast crawl is, I'm just going to give a very brief, explanation. It's when a baby is born, you give them the time to recover from the birth experience, because often people think that it's just the mother that's exhausted. The baby is also very exhausted. They've done a lot of work. They're instinctively going to start crawling up towards the mother's nipple, and they can hear their mother's voice, they can see the mother's face and areola, and they can also smell it. This is a natural instinct that mammals have, and babies have that instinct. So if you leave your child to crawl up to find the breast by themselves, and to also latch without your assistance, they're going to latch on properly. So I started watching YouTube videos. I watched so many YouTube videos on what exactly breast crawl is. If you're curious about it, I would highly recommend it. I'll put one or two links below of the videos that I watched that I really liked, and your baby will have the perfect latch. So this is something I highly recommend because I never had issues with the latching, and I did the breast crawl. Besides the fact that I was afraid of feeling pain, it was so amazing because, of course, I'd never had a child before, but it was really amazing to watch this baby just, make their way up at some point. They're like, all right, I'm going for it. You know, it's not fast, it's very slow because, of course, they've just been born. But we watched the baby. He crawled up after a couple of minutes and found the breast and started feeding. So that's like one thing I would really highly recommend, also because it's instinctive. One of the fears a lot of first time moms have, which I definitely had, was whether you'll have enough milk supply. I mean, just the thought of your baby starving because you're not producing enough milk. Sometimes that's the reason why people resort to formula, but the reality is, in the beginning, your baby gets colostrum, and that is really, really nutritious and so healthy. And it has all the nutrients that they need. So you don't need to be worried about that. But I was worried about it. I did my research. Of course, they say if you have enough wet diapers, if your baby is gaining weight, your baby is not crying, all these reasons that they mention, I told myself I couldn't, risk, because how long do you have to wait before you can see weight gain? It's a few days of starving that go by before the baby gains weight, or a few wet diapers. What's a few if you've never changed your own child's diapers? All right, so this is something I'm not explicitly recommending to you, but I'm just sharing my experience and telling you what I did. And well, it worked for me. I found out that people that have issues with lactation can also take fenugreek to improve their lactation. So I don't want to risk it. I wasn't leaving anything to fate. I didn't want to wait until I maybe have problems with lactation. So I further researched on this whole fenugreek thing, and I ended up buying organic activated fenugreek capsules. So the activated part is very important because normally when you have fenugreek seeds, you have to soak them in water for hours or, for a day to activate them. And this is an important process because it improves digestion, it improves absorption and the bioavailability. So, yeah, I bought those capsules. I took them from when he was born until I got Milcheinschuss. Sorry, guys, the English term is not coming to my mind. And once I had Milcheinschuss, I stopped taking them. I was good, I was confident. So, I would recommend that do whatever you have to do to feel confident, to eliminate stress, because stress is really not good for breastfeeding. It really can negatively impact milk supply. So for me, that was the one thing that I did, and it worked. And if you're going to take something, I'd advise that you speak with your midwife or speak, with your gynecologist about it, or whatever medical specialist, that's helping you through this pregnancy. So before having a baby, I was planning on pumping and, having a freezer with a stash of, breast milk, because of course it's so healthy and it's so good to store it. And if you read about it, there's so many uses for it. I just wanted to have this milk on standby. And I didn't try pumping until he was, I think, 6 weeks. My mom was around, she was visiting, and I had a dentist appointment. And I thought, okay, perfect opportunity, to use this pump. And I thought, it works for every woman. It did work, but like after 40 minutes of pumping, I only had 60 mils. And that 60 mils was gone in what felt like a few seconds. So, pumping doesn't always work so great for everybody. And this is something I also didn't know in advance. Luckily, I was planning on exclusively breastfeeding for the first 6 months, but I did need to pump according to my plan. Like, when I wanted to go to the dentist and my mom was around, or I wanted to pump when I went for my friend's bachelorette party when the baby was 4 months old. But this all it didn't work. The pumping didn't work for me. And initially I thought maybe there's something wrong with the pump or there's something wrong with me. And then I found out pumping doesn't always work for anybody. So you don't have to do it. If it's not working for you, not a big deal as long as the breastfeeding is working. I mean, of course, if you want to go back to work, then you need to do further research on that. I can't advise on that because I was able to exclusively breastfeed for 6 months and beyond. But my message for now is that pumping doesn't work for everybody, and it's not a train smash if it doesn't. I mean, look, I'm still alive. When I was pregnant, of course, with time, I was focused on, growing my maternity wardrobe. I had a few clothes, to accommodate the bump. But one thing I never stopped to think about was that I would need, clothes that accommodate breastfeeding when I leave the house. And the very first time we left the house, I got dressed, and just as I was about to leave, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this outfit is absolutely not practical for when this baby is gonna start crying because he's hungry." And so I stood in front of my cupboard, and then I realized that I actually was not prepared for breastfeeding. So, I mean, if it's something you plan on doing closer to your due date, look at your wardrobe and just really think about how are you going to do it when you have to breastfeed the baby. I mean, it all depends on what your wardrobe looks like, right? Mine wasn't really accommodating, so I got a few. I tried to keep things versatile so that I'd wear stuff I could wear even after, when I was done with breastfeeding. I got a lot of button-down shirts because those were practical. You can just open buttons. Sometimes I'd wear a t-shirt and then a button-down shirt on top. So it's like you're covered at the top. Now this is now thinking of if I have to breastfeed in public. So you have your t-shirt covering, a little bit, and then you lift your button-down shirt from the bottom. Or certain dresses that are easy to open, that are not a round neck. How are you going to be able to breastfeed in public? But I also found out, the first time I had to breastfeed in public, I was so cautious, covering up and whatnot, make sure people don't see the breast and they're not offended. And it was so interesting to develop how that completely changed with time. At some point, I actually really didn't care, because if the baby is hungry and I'm in public, I can't tell the baby to wait until I get home because they're hungry now. They need their food now. And, nobody needs a hungry baby. And babies actually don't have to get hungry. So, yeah, the first few weeks I was really shy and covering up. I still did cover up. Um, but with time, I didn't care about it anymore. And I think that's okay. It also depends on where you are, and surprisingly enough, there are places where I sometimes did breastfeed the baby, and people would just walk up to me and say stuff like, "We're so happy to see you breastfeeding the baby. People don't do this anymore these days, and it's so healthy." I know I have a lot of friends, or I know other moms that have very negative tales that they tell about comments that people made, but I got really, really positive comments, especially from the elder generation. And interestingly enough, I noticed that this breastfeeding in public, or breastfeeding at all, it's like a trend. There's some, depending on when you were born, there's some people, they're like, "Oh, you're so lucky I didn't get to breastfeed. When I had my baby, it wasn't in fashion, it was looked down upon." And then some people be like, "Oh yeah, I got to breastfeed. It's now back in fashion." I'm like, I'm not doing this as a fashion statement. I'm doing it because I strongly believe it's the best for my baby. I mean, it's what I want for my child. But yeah, it was just interesting. Breastfeeding in public is a thing. Yeah, it's an experience of its own. But I got used to it with time, and I just really didn't care who was around. I just did it. Baby's hungry, baby gets to eat. Breastfeeding is also, I'd say, it's an emotional journey, because there's the anticipation. You're waiting. I can't wait, for this to work out. I can't wait for the Milcheinschuss. And then it comes. It's like, yay, this is a great milestone. And then, you know, the main reason for the sleepless nights is because of breastfeeding. And then you're like an operating zombie. And this is all because of breastfeeding. And then there's the bond that you develop with your child whilst you're breastfeeding. And then there's the frustration when the cluster feeding comes through, and then having to navigate how to do it when you're in public or when you're amongst friends. And it's an emotional journey. I hadn't stopped to think about that in advance, but it is the emotional aspect is not spoken about often enough. And then at some point it's like, oh, you want to stop, and it's like, oh, you look at your little baby, you're like, oh, but they still want it. There's a lot of emotions associated with it. Whatever emotion you feel, it is okay. You can be upset, you can be excited, you can cry, you can do whatever it is. Any emotion that comes with it is absolutely beautiful, and one day it will be over. For me, the saddest part was when it came to an end, and I didn't even realize it coming to an end. But, like, that's a story for another day. The absolutely interesting and amazing finding I made whilst on this breastfeeding journey, it was something that I didn't know. I mean, I always heard they say breastfeeding is so healthy, it's like medicine. When the baby's feeling sick, you should give them breast milk. And at some point I was like, but why? How does my milk know that my baby's sick, and how does it create the right antibodies? Of course, I'm not going to give a detailed technical explanation, but this is also something I looked up amongst the 1 million things I did look up. And then I found out that the baby's saliva has the pathogens, right? So whatever bacteria or virus or whatever it is that the baby has, it's in the saliva. And the saliva is absorbed by the Montgomery glands on the mother's nipples. And then this sends the signal to the mother's body that the baby's feeling sick. So the mom then creates antibodies that are then, transferred to the breast milk. And the baby drinks this breast milk, which is like medicine. Of course, I did not give a perfect scientific explanation, but that's vaguely how it works. You can look it up. Maybe one day I can, dedicate an episode to that, because I found that to be extremely interesting. And after I read that, I was like, I am never ever going to stop breastfeeding. So that's another thing that solidified my decision, to continue breastfeeding, and I found it absolutely amazing. So when he fell sick, I would exclusively do skin to skin and breastfeed the whole day, and he bounced back within no time. So yeah, this is something, I can really testify works. I did it. It's absolutely amazing. One thing I also did, I joined one or two Facebook groups for breastfeeding. So you have a lot of moms on the same journey, messaging at 2 a.m. Hey, this is what's going on. So if you also happen to be up at 2 a.m. and you can end up messaging with a mom who's breastfeeding, you're in the same situation. But there's also lactation specialists in these groups. They give advice, and it's just really nice to be a part of a community on the same journey. I know I have a lot of my friends were like, oh my gosh, why on earth are you in those groups? If it makes sense for you, just do it. For me, it was really good and I appreciate it. I really appreciate all the women that were supporting each other and giving, amazing advice. Thanks, Emil. However, this breastfeeding journey, it's a personal journey, it's your journey, and however you do it, that's the right way for you. Whether you're going to be breastfeeding for 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 2 years, it's up to you, and however you do it is the right way, and you should just own it and embrace it. So if you found this video helpful, please like this video, hit the subscribe button. If you plan on breastfeeding or you're already breastfeeding, please drop a heart in the comment section. I really wish I could support you, but one thing I can tell you, you got this, mama. Thank you so much for watching this and see you next time.
Like, comment, subscribe, and share.